Welcome to the Donna Sebo Show Special Editions. This program is dedicated to featuring authors and experts from around the world who will share their knowledge and insight with you, the viewing and listening audience. Literacy and education are the keys to freedom, and diversity enables one to live in a world with broader perspectives. This is Donna Sebo, and I will be your host for the next hour. Hello and welcome to the Donna Sebo Show Special Editions. I'm delighted you're able to join us because we are going to be talking about a subject matter, well, I've had direct association with for a number of years. What is that? That is mind power. We're going to be talking about mind power for everyday living. And if you're curious, well, I hope you will stay with us during this program because we have two very special guests. Judy Wilkins-Smith, who is coming in to us via Zoom in Texas. And then also we have Jim Jensen, who is from the Seattle area, which of course is my home turf. And we look forward to sharing our knowledge and our information with you because all of us believe, each and every one of us on this program today, believe that you have a power within yourself that is so phenomenal that it can change your life dramatically. But what if you don't know? What if you've never had an opportunity to discuss the various attributes of mind skills that you can develop that can enrich your life? I want to welcome you, Judy. I want to welcome you, Jim, to this program because I'm so excited about this as it has been such a significant part of my life. It has been so important to not only develop mind skills, but also to be able to utilize them. And I think when we can share that knowledge with other people, we not only empower them, but we empower ourselves as well. Now, Judy, I want people to know that your book, and of course we have the books on display, so people have the option to be able to go and purchase them themselves and to check in to also your websites, which would be listed at the end of this program. But Judy, yours is Decoding Your Emotional Blueprint, a powerful guide to transformation through disentangling multi-generational patterns. Now, you have been deeply involved in training people individually as well as with large groups, also with families. And you are an executive coach, a trainer, a facilitator, a thought partner. You are a leadership conference leader and also a motivational speaker. And you like to reframe people's thinking and their understandings about how they can get through challenges and how they can make their lives so much fuller and richer than what they could ever imagine. Jim, you have actually two books with us today. You have Expand the Power of Your Subconscious Mind, and that is by Joseph Murphy, but also you took the material and you expanded it, and then 7 Keys to Unlock Your Full Potential. I'm so pleased to have both of you here, and we are going to be talking about items that maybe people have never even given any consideration to, and that is very special. Judy, I wanted to pose a question to you because this is coming up more and more in science, and that is about the ancestral connection that every one of us has, and we're all affected by it. Let's talk about that for just a minute. How did you get involved with this perspective that science is now just, my goodness, exploring in much greater depth?
Right. Quite by mistake. My background was medical. I moved over to the US, and moving over to the US, my father was killed, and it was a case of write books or go crazy, so I chose write books. I figured that was probably the healthier of the two. And while I was writing books, I stumbled into this material, started studying it, and then moved from individual to doing executive coaching and then to high potentials and family systems. And it kind of just took off from there. And I think sort of about three years down the line, discovered that it had started in South Africa, which is where I'm from.
Amazing. Now with you, when you introduced this to people, the ancestral connection, how did people respond to it? Because it must be for many very perplexing. They say, I've been born, I'm with a family. Why does the ancestral connection make such a difference?
The ancestral connection is what begins to give us our self talk. What do we say to and about ourselves? Because we have a language that's passed down to us through generations. We say things about money, we say things about relationships, but where did that come from? It came from those who came before us, and they get passed down to us either by word of mouth or epigenetically in the way we express certain genes. So, this is why it's crucial. And then when you get into genealogy, it's even more important because you begin to discover that it's not just about where you came from and how you belong, but what those events are, what they mean in your life, and what they can mean when you flip the limitations into potential. So it's pretty big.
It is big. It's huge. Now, Jim, you have with your book, The 7 Keys to Unlock One's Potential. This is a publication that you used. You even did a presentation, and there's something on your website about a program that you did before a business group. But The 7 Keys for you was your very first book that you put out, and you emphasized the power of the mind and how important and significant it is. Now, you were talking to business groups, and this is something when it comes to business, the power of the mind is very, very important. Who was the man John Boyle, and how did he influence you? Because if I remember correctly, he was one of the first people that you found out about relative to utilizing the subconscious mind.
Well, yes. And several years ago, because when my wife and I were 25 years old, we were with Encyclopedia Britannica, and I was asked to go to Australia and be in charge of sales for all of Australia and New Zealand. And it was great because this was before we had children, so my wife Jerry was able to travel with me to different places and see what it was all about. But the whole time we were there with our friends from the West Coast, and especially Seattle, would say, you've got to go through this 4-day seminar called Omega. And John Boyle was the founder of Omega. And we would say, well, that's great. We'd like to do that. We're not going to fly from Australia to the United States to attend this. But when we get back, we'd like to explore that. Well, 2 years later, I was promoted to Vice President of Sales worldwide, with the exception of the United States. But we were moved back to the corporate headquarters in Chicago, Illinois. And this was, a long time ago. And we decided to go to the 4-day seminar called Omega in California. And there were probably 40 or 50 attendees. And we were just stunned at how John Boyle had come up with his perception and definition of the power of the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And I was so impressed that at the end of the seminar, being only 27 years old, I went up and affectionately poked him in the chest and I said, John, someday I'd like to teach your seminar, and someday I think I'd like to own your company. And he kind of looked at me like, yeah, right, kid. Mm-hmm. But both those things came to pass. And he got terminally ill, and I purchased the company from him about 90 days before he passed. And I had the great privilege to teach Omega for 11 years. I had 4 other instructors because I was running another business at the same time. But the information was so good. And it is to this day. And I mean, the primary thing was learning how to use affirmations in the first person present tense. Not I am going to get better than this, but see the end result of what you expect. And I mean, like weight loss, I weighed at one point 225 pounds. I wanted to lose 25 pounds. So I didn't say, well, someday I'm going to lose 25 pounds, but we would say first the language and visualizing the end result as the way it would be. So even though if I got on the scale, it said 225, my affirmation was, I look good and feel good at 200 pounds. Then to support that, the second phase was visualization. So we would create a visual imprint. In this case, it was pretty easy to see myself having lost the 25 pounds in a new suit, whatever. And then the feeling that went with that is really feeling great about that. Now, what would that do? If you were doing that, you'd also become aware of your eating habits and cutting back on food, maybe increasing exercise. But in, I think it was less than 90 days, I had lost the 25 pounds. And I was so impressed with the power of visualization, of affirmations, and we use them to this day. But I always tell an audience, as I am today, I was not the one that created that information, but I learned from the masters who did. And I was surrounded by many other, still am, brilliant minds like our guest today and you, who have enabled me to continue to move down that path of expanded awareness and knowledge.
I think that when we have a chance to demonstrate it to ourselves, that's the very first thing. But when we can really move forward in our lives. Judy, one of the comments that you have in your book, Decoding Your Emotional Blueprint, there was a woman by the name of Lisa. And you talk about this woman and how the fact that she was adopted. And you talked about what you describe as double the field in energetic flow, systemic sentences by ancestors. What did you mean by that?
So systemic sentences are a little bit like what Jim was talking about, and I'm fascinated by his, and I wanted to comment as well about affirmations. But systemic sentences are the things that we tell ourselves about things. I'm no good at money. I'm terrible at relationships. I'm not so good at whatever it is, math, whatever it is. But these systemic sentences will often begin in the mouths of our ancestors. So great-grandmother was useless with money. She tells at least grandmother, everybody in the family is useless with money. And that kind of cycles down and becomes a reality until we start to change that. And in systemic work, what we say is, when the brain tells the body the story that the body can believe, that becomes the new truth. And as Jim said, it's with emotion. You need an elevated emotion and you need commitment and you need it in the now. So yes, when somebody has double the field and double the systemic sentences, what you're getting is you're getting the biological systemic sentences. In other words, those mottos, sayings, feelings, doings. But you're also getting the nurturing ones from the adoptive family. You grow up in that and you wondered, did that rub off on me? And you can see through generations that, yes, it did. And epigenetically, it's probably had enough of an impact that it's created an epigenetic imprint on your system. So now you have both of those systems coming together.
I find your comments so fascinating because in every family, you'll have a child and someone will say, that child is just like grandfather Todd.
Exactly.
I mean, or grandmother, Minnie Mouse. I mean, it's really amazing how we will make those correlations. And even in my own family, I think one individual that is almost, even though she's female, she is almost like an exact replica of the father, and her behavioral patterns, everything. It's like you've got two people that hardly ever, if ever, have seen each other, and yet you've got that young one mirroring that they haven't even had an association with. It's absolutely incredible, just incredible. Now, Jim, you've mentioned the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, and let's talk about what the difference is with the conscious mind and the subconscious so that my audience has an understanding. Now, there are many other people that I'm sure that are going to be viewing this that already have a little bit of understanding, but give us your definition because Mr. Boyle and also Dr. Joseph Murphy had a big impact on your thinking.
Yes. Well, today most schools or fields of education teach that the primary two things we have thinking-wise are the conscious area of the mind and the subconscious. And the conscious area is us talking what we're doing, explaining things, all at an intellectual pace. And interestingly enough, the subconscious today is still predominantly taught and perceived as that part that handles our bodily functions. It grows our hair, it digests our food, it heals a wound. But what typically is not taught generally is that the subconscious is also a creative event or creative opportunity to expand beyond. It operates as a method of taking what the conscious mind is and improving the opportunities to achieve the goal. And here's the key. The subconscious takes literally what the conscious mind says and then helps the person achieve that. So if I were to say, gosh, I've just had the worst time trying to remember names, they'd say, we got it, boss. We'll make sure you do. So I would come up with somebody whose names I should know, and I'd go, oh, and they'd say, no, you're not supposed to remember this. Or whatever we would program, and it's still to this date, will carry out the instructions given to it by the conscious area of the mind. And one of the visual examples we like to use in the book is, and oftentimes it will perform according to what it was instructed to do, even if the conscious mind starts to change its thinking. But in the book we talk about a visualization of like an ocean liner going across the sea or a large sea vessel, and the conscious mind would be like the captain of the ship up in the office where all the can see where they're going, the equipment. And the subconscious is like the crew down in the hold of the ship, below the water level, can't even see where the ship is going. But they carry out precisely the orders given to it by the conscious area of the mind, which would be the captain. So if the captain says full speed ahead, port, starboard, 10 degrees, they just say, aye, aye, sir, not minding whether it gets the vessel to its destination, runs into the rocks, or hits another vessel. So we need to be very mindful. We have the opportunity to be very mindful of how we're talking to ourselves and catch ourselves if there are qualities we are reinforcing that we would prefer to improve or to change. Because the subconscious works 24/7, carrying out the instructions, so to speak, by the conscious area of the mind.
We have so much that goes on in everyday life, and it's so easy to get into what we want to call the negative patterning. And I have to laugh because so often I encounter people that say, oh, Donna, you're just such an optimist. No, it's very deliberate. We have to be deliberately, and I'll use your word mindful, Jim, because I think that that is something that's coming up more and more in conversation. And that is paying attention to where you are, what you are doing, and focusing on what it is that you want to demonstrate, what it is that you want to hold in your psyche and in your attitude and demeanor, because it really does make a difference. I was doing an interview with someone who's a negotiator, and this negotiator was in a very caustic kind of an environment. This was a gentleman that was in the international arena. There were a lot of politicians involved, and of course you have all of these diverse opinions and big egos and all of this that he had to contend with. And he had to be very mindful of where he kept his mind, because if he didn't, then he'd find that he would contribute maybe to a distortion or a discussion that would not achieve what he wanted in the position of being a mediator, trying to take care of bringing people together at the table. And he said sometimes it was really challenging, because sometimes he wanted to punch people's lights out because he'd get so irritated with them. And it's one of these things. That was a discipline. And I think we have to use the D word, discipline, because you have to pay attention. You have to pay attention. And that requires being willing to do it. And I think that's so important. Now, Judy, with you, you also talk about emotional DNA in your book, Decoding Your Emotion Code. This is something that I think is just as significant as the physical DNA, because we've touched on it a little bit. So let's talk about that. And there was a woman, Amanda, that you mention in your book that this was especially related to, was the emotional DNA.
Yeah, so emotional DNA, you inherit physical DNA, we all know that, but you also inherit your emotional DNA, your patterns of thoughts, feelings, and actions. And the difference is with the physical DNA, there's not much you can do about it. With emotional DNA, there's everything you can do about it. I tell people every day, you always have a choice. You may not like it, but you are always at choice. Watch what you're choosing. Watch what you're choosing. And your choices sit in your words, feelings, and actions. And exactly as Jim said, you find yourself doing things because the subconscious is doing what it's doing. Well, it's not just even the subconscious. It's a multi-generational subconscious. If you had, again, if you go back to great-grandmother or great-grandfather and there was a thought, feeling, and action, that gets to cycle all the way down, and then you eat it as though it were yours, only it's really not, but you're feeling it as though it was yours. And the beautiful thing with that is if it's a limiting pattern, when it comes to you, you sit with two things, a pattern that wants to stop and a pattern that wants to start. The pattern that wants to stop is the multi-generational pattern that's often served its purpose. And the one that wants to start is the next chapter that only you can write. And you have to choose it, or you get to choose it. You are choosing every single day who you are. But it happens more forcefully when it's with commitment and an elevated emotion, or in limiting cases with a really not so elevated emotion.
And I also think that there's so much here that we have to decide who we want to be and how we want other
Absolutely.
people to perceive us. Now that takes thinking. And that means you have to have integrity with yourself, because it may mean that you don't copy your favorite movie star, but you really look at who you are. And that is a level of personal responsibility. What are your thoughts on that, Jim?
Well, I think that you're correct. And one of the great things about Joseph Murphy's book that I was able to add to in my portion was to introduce the reader to the incredible part of the mind, the creative part of the mind, that people are not taught or even aware of, but we've all had experiences. Let's say we're going on a trip, we have an early morning flight, we have to get up at 4 o'clock. We normally get up at 6 or 7, but it's so important, so we set the alarm, obviously, for 4. We may call the person we're traveling with, say, geez, you got to be sure you wake me up or call me. Now, we don't necessarily go to bed earlier, we might go to bed later, because we're doing last minute packing, whatever. But we finally get in bed, go to sleep, sound asleep. and we wake up with a start, and we look over at the clock, and it's 3:59, just going to 4, zzz, the alarm goes off, zzz, our friend calls us. But what woke us up? The supra-conscious. And it can be used in problem solving far beyond the knowledge we've been exposed to, where we can reach outside. I'll give you one example. When I was president of Grand Tree Furniture Rental, I had gone through the Omega training, and we were stumbling with a marketing issue. And on a Friday, I brought our 3 or 4 marketing experts into a meeting, said, we have got to do this better. We're missing something. So what I'd like to have you do, because they've been through this training, is over the weekend, please turn this over to the supraconscious. And let's meet at 9 o'clock Monday morning. These were all Harvard MBA graduates, I mean, brilliant thinkers. And let's get a solution to this problem. And among the 3 or 4 gentlemen and ladies that were in our deal, we had a corporate secretary who was from England, could barely speak English, but terrific young lady. And she was taking notes. So we get together Monday morning at 9 o'clock. And I said, okay, what's the solution to our problem that we're dealing with? And little Kathy Hornsby raises her hand, and she says, Jim, can I say something? Yeah, Kathy, go ahead. What? Well, yesterday, Sunday, I was out working in the yard. I was just picking flowers and doing some things. And this information came to me, this thought, is there any reason we couldn't do, and she goes on A, B, C, D, and all our marketing wizards are going, holy moly, that is the perfect answer. How did she get that? That comes from the supraconscious. Once we experience something like that, and we can grow more in that field of knowledge, there is data that we all have access to that may not be from the school books and everything else. So I think that the whole last part of Murphy's book is where I was able to add the introduction to the supraconscious, beyond just the subconscious.
It brings to mind a story that was shared with me many years ago that has never left me. And it was about a construction team. They were doing a high-rise building. And the high-rise building, they were encountering an air conditioning problem. Well, you can imagine, there's that building, all of these floors that have gone up, and they have a challenge with air conditioning. What are they going to do? And they had a contract limitation. They had a certain amount of time. They were right at the edge, and they couldn't figure out why the air conditioning system was not working. So they were, like I said, right at the wire time-wise. The boss was frustrated. He called in all of the engineers. He said, we are in the deep six if we do not fix this. So they all go home. The manager of everything is just sweating bullets because he's got to come up with an answer. One of the engineers was a night worker, and he liked to work at night on anything that came up that had to be resolved. And he had worked just as hard as everybody else. He's working at his drafting table, and he's just thinking to himself, I wonder what we are not seeing. And a hologram appeared in front of him. And he looked at the hologram. He was astonished. He didn't know where it came from. And he said, okay, I wonder what it looks like upside down, because it was a hologram of the system that went and turned upside down right in front of him. And he's looking at it, and he didn't disclaim anything that he was seeing. And he said, now I see what we're missing. So he drew out all the specs. And then the next morning, bright and early, he's at the office. He goes into his boss. He says, I have found the solution. And he presented the information. His boss looked at him, said, I want to know where you found this information. He said, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. He said, we don't have time. Let's get busy. Let's get it done. But I want to know about this. So they went in. They made the correction. Everything worked beautifully. At the end of the day, they were able to come together again. The boss called this one engineer aside and he said, I want to know exactly how you got this information, because we have been doing this for so long. And he said, gee, sir, I don't think so. I just don't think you're going to believe me. He said, try me. And so he told him about the hologram, how it flipped upside down, how he was able to examine it, find out where the spot of difficulty was so that they could mend it. And he said, see, I told you you wouldn't believe me. The boss said, trust me. I know exactly what you're going through. Congratulations, you saved the job. So what you're describing, Jim, is so important. Judy, when you talk about, in your book, the emotional blueprint, you also go into the neuroscience regarding this. Now, to me, this is absolutely fabulous because so much of what we've already discussed, if we tried talking about this 5 years ago, nobody would have said anything. You know, you have these people that are open, that'll say, I want to learn. I mean, Dr. Joseph Murphy was around for a long time. He influenced people around the world. Mr. Boyle did. And you've been influencing people, Judy. I have been influencing people because of what we share. But today, mainstream science is finally catching up with this. And so when people hear that, they go, oh, okay, well, if a scientist is talking about this, doctors might be talking about this, by golly, there has to be some value. And it's true. And you go into this quite a bit. Tell us about the neuroscience that you've become aware of relative to the physical, emotional blueprint that we work with and how it's significant it is in making people's lives better.
You know, I break it down into a very, very simple format. When people are working with a pattern, so what we do is we look at an issue, we look at a pattern, we actually look at it in 3D by using live participants to represent different aspects of the pattern. Because when you can see it, hear it, feel it, you're creating this multi-sensory, aha, embodied moment that happens for you. You can finally, exactly like you described with a hologram, you're getting in 3D. So then people say to me, okay, that's fine, but this is difficult. And I say to them, no, it's not. If you have a particular thought system, then one new thought, one new feeling, and one new action, that's it. Just that is going to start the movement. Bearing in mind that the minute you take one new thought, one new feeling, one new action, you're actually in the quantum field because now you're changing the pattern completely. And if you do that with commitment and you do that perpetually or consistently, you're going to find that within a relatively short period of time, you begin to change that ship that Jim was talking about that's in the middle of the ocean. You begin to change it in ways you didn't imagine. And so now what's happening is you're no longer repeating ancient history or the history of your ancestors. You're now writing the chapter that only you can write, and you're turning this pattern into something else. And if you really are conscious of what you're doing, it's huge and it's powerful. But instead of saying to somebody, look, do this, and this, it's literally start with one new thought, one new feeling, one new action with commitment applied. That's what begins to make the difference. And it begins to break multi-generational cycles.
There have been discussions about if you want to change a habit. I've heard people say you can change it in 21 days, you can change it in 90 days. Repetition is very significant. And I think too often, I can't speak for anybody else, but sometimes I will get so busy that I will actually say out loud, enough is enough, one thing at a time. One thing at a time, because it's so easy to get scattered. And I think that that's something that many people experience, is that, gee whiz, I've got 45 things I've got to do today, so I'll do this, and maybe we get a phone call and we get distracted and then we go someplace else. And if we can just stop ourselves and say one thing at a time, because they've proven over and over again the multitasking just wastes a lot of energy. And so often we don't get things done. But this pertains to habits too, the habits that we have. And sometimes if we are mindful and we find that we're ready to regurgitate words that, as you both have expressed, gee whiz, I am so fat, look at me, and then what do you say? Wait a minute, I change the script. I say, this is who I am. I am a very fine human being. I've got this quality, that quality, whatever you want to focus on. And it's changing that mindset of habit. And it really does make a difference. It makes a huge difference.
It makes all the difference.
Tell me, and I'll be asking Jim this question, how did it change your life when you started doing this research and you started getting so engaged in helping other people learn this? How has it changed your life?
A lot. It's changed everything. I really did sort of subscribe to the idea of little me, small me, yay, great. Now the first question on my website is, how big are you willing to be? I began to understand that I wasn't just this little thing, that I was this person in search of an adventure which was happening all around me. And so it changed from small to big. It changed from impossible to possible. It changed from who am I to who am I not to. It flipped the script for me 180 degrees. It gave me experiences of things like holographs and different places, different dimensions. And above all, it actually gave me access to some of the finest minds and some of the deepest courage I've ever seen. And I get to interact with that every single day. So I went from a routine lab kind of setting to, wow, this is an adventure, and guess what? I'm on it.
Yes. Jim, how has this changed your life?
I think it's helped me and our family. I mean, think of the word impossible. When somebody says it's impossible, we could say, wait a minute, is that one word or three? They say, what do you mean? Well, what if we said I am possible? And we try to eliminate, be conscious of eliminating negative input in describing what we can or cannot do. And we were blessed to have gone through this training before we had children. Mm-hmm. And so they have been raised in an environment that stressed how great they were and the proper language. And today, as adults in their 50s, some younger, but they're all exceeding in their careers at the top of what they do. And in our management systems, this is the biggest thing I've benefited from, is having learned the data that I did early. We at the management level said we have an opportunity to create, people that come here probably spend 50% of their waking time during the week, if they're lucky enough to get 8 hours of sleep. So they spend 8 hours in their work and 8 hours doing whatever. But let's create an environment in the workplace that not only helps make better employees out of our people, but makes better people out of our employees. So we spent time, we had people that were paid to go from different offices throughout the country and teach like affirmations and other procedures that weren't directly related to that particular issue of work. And we had after we sold that company and 20 years later, we had a reunion in Las Vegas where 80 or 90 people came together. They'd all gone their own ways, but really doing well. And they got up voluntarily and shared how their lives had grown as a result of what they learned, not about renting furniture or selling furniture, because of the other teachings we had. Now, it did improve, their work skills and their productivity. So it wasn't just an investment in something was a extra deal that the company didn't benefit from. But that was the most exciting thing, and I think today I still enjoy talking to groups and having them share with me what are some of the challenges, let's call them, that you are working on either as individuals or a company, and see if we can change. We don't ignore what it is they're doing, but what's a better way to deal with that issue and hopefully achieve the success we're looking for more rapidly and more effectively.
One of the things I feel is so important with our conversation is that this knowledge can be applied in educational systems, it can be applied in business environments, it can be applied in all kinds of different environments. I had someone I remember reading some material on, they said, you have to believe in people. But one of the things that I find in my interaction with the public, as I have, there is a big need to be able to have this communication going out to other people so that they understand that they're not on the outside. They can be part of this. And you don't have to have a PhD in science or in psychology or anything else. And children catch on to this so quickly. And I think your comment about making better human beings is so important. We have such chaos going on today. I had someone I had lunch with make a comment of just, we are living in such miserable times. Well, if you study humanity's history, for goodness sake, there's been a lot of miserable times throughout humanity. And we've got all kinds of records on that. But the people that actually ended up making the biggest difference, whether it had to do with a faith, whether it had to do with a product, a service, with education, it didn't make any difference, were those that said, we can do better and we can step outside of the box. And we are living in a cycle right now where things are changing so fast. They are changing so fast technologically, and we are forgetting about the human component that has to be open and aware of those possibilities, that they have an opportunity to develop and to explore. And if they don't have that opportunity, then they're going to be feeling as if life has no value. We've got all kinds of stats that are coming across with that. And Judy, in your book also, you bring up something about what you call the meta patterns. What are the meta patterns?
So the meta patterns are the large patterns, the global patterns, patterns that say money is evil, we're having miserable times, we are not doing well. So a meta pattern is something that arises from a meta event. Something happens and we all make a decision about that. And that decision then translates into thoughts, feelings, actions, which then becomes mindsets, and then we think it's the truth. Only it's not the truth, it's our truth, and we can change at any time. So those terrible people in wherever, those ghastly human beings over there, becomes a global speak. Sentences about money, all of our money finance sentences are global speak. These are very large patterns. And so you're onto something really important. When we flip that script and we give people, it's one of the three most important criteria, a way to belong, they latch onto it very quickly. Entertainers know that, and they use meta sentences. We are the force. May the force be with you. That's a really, really big statement. And people love it because it doesn't matter what gender they are, what color they are, they can belong within that. So a meta pattern is something that governs those systemic sentences.
Jim, Dr. Joseph Murphy had a great impact on you, and I'm very familiar with Dr. Joseph Murphy and his work. And this was something that he would emphasize over and over again. If you have the desire, if you have the aspiration, that just hold it in your mind, hold it in your feelings. And this, I'm repeating what you've already both shared. It's the mind, body, spirit, emotion. It's the total package. It's not any one segment exclusive. So it's that total package that when you bring that in, You create a shift in your individual world, and that shift is honest and it's true, and you can move forward where others may not. And we have so much that's going on right now that is fear-mongering of the utmost level, and it has been ever since COVID. It has been something that's been paralyzing to people. And I like to think that what we're discussing here would enable people to understand they're not helpless, they are not victims, and they can make the shifts and changes that they want to make. Jim, what was one of your favorite stories with Dr. Joseph Murphy in the book on the power of the subconscious mind? Because you did expand on that. But what was it that impressed you so much about how he related to this in his generation?
I think to help broaden our perspective of how great we really are. And I think back, we were talking about when we use the words impossible. For example, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, whenever it was, in the field of running, it said it would be impossible that, in this case, man could ever run a mile in less than 4 minutes. And they'd come dangerously close. I mean, 4 minutes and 3 seconds, whatever, but nobody ever broke the record of the 4-minute mile until Roger Bannister came along, and he was in a race, very positive, and ran the mile like in 3 minutes and 54 seconds. And there was no change in the condition of the track or the running shoes, but only his own I never believed that it was impossible to do that. So we say, well, so what? So what is it in the next 24 months? 12 other men, in this case, ran sub 4-minute miles. There was no change in the surface of the running track. There was no change in the equipment, such as the running shoes or whatever, but it was the elimination of that thing they had locked onto for so long that it was impossible. So it just gets reinforced, and I think the people that we interact with and work both in and out of the workplace is to enhance our awareness of not just how we speak to others, but how we speak to ourselves. And it's just never too late to continue to grow in what we can grow. And I'm still enjoying changing things when I see something I want to have change, of which a part of it may not be the whole thing, but is a change in my mind shift that, I told myself I can't do this. That's nonsense. Let's do it. And so what do we change to do that? And I think that's kind of the ongoing opportunity in expanding our lives and living much more full lives than a lot of people have in the past chosen to do.
Someone watching this program and listening to it, because I share this also, the audio portion of this on my radio show as well, they might say, oh, everything that you're expressing, that makes so much sense, but gee whiz, nothing's happening. I've been doing the affirmations, and I have the objective of I want to be the president of my own company. Let's just use that as an example. I want to develop a business. I have this idea. This is what I want to do. And I've been working at it for 2 or 3 years, and just nothing is really happening the way I thought it would be. We've got a challenge today because lots of times people think that something is supposed to be instantaneous. Now, it can be. I'm not saying that that cannot happen. But often, there is a timing factor. Something may not be ready for a certain environment, or you may not have the certain tools or the equipment that you may need. You may not be in that environment that is going to be supportive of you. You may have to change your environment to be able to have that support. Let's address this, and Jim, I'll come to you first on it, because you know, in business, there's ups and downs. Look at what we've gone through with COVID and how difficult it was for people to adapt.
Correct.
So this is something, it took time. We had to go through this. But should we give up our dreams? Should we give up what we aspire for? I don't think so. We are coming up with so many different innovations. Let's address the time effect on this, because sometimes people get very frustrated because we've got phones. We're able to connect with just about anybody in the world in just a matter of seconds. Look at how we're able to communicate today, and this wouldn't have necessarily been possible 10 years ago, 5 years ago, to the degree it is today. So let's talk about that time factor, Jim.
Well, I think everybody's got a different watch going on in their mind. And oftentimes when we're doing something that seems to be taking, we couldn't do it any faster, and then we see somebody else doing exactly the same thing, and we get some, how did you do that? Whatever it is, data input that changes our inner thinking of things. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't also, maybe for certain skills, physical skills, make changes in our body, in what we eat, how we exercise, what we do to improve that overall performance. But it's just a way, it becomes a way of life and a belief of life that let's really get clear on what it is we want. Let's write that out. Let's talk to people that are surrounding us, our family, whoever, and what is their data input that can be added to this? And somebody might say, well, have you ever thought of doing the, and you go, where did you come up with that? That was brilliant. So it doesn't have to be just talking to extremely well-educated people, because we want to also understand at a certain level we are all blessed with insatiable knowledge, and it's a question of how do we access it.
Judy, what are your thoughts?
Couple of thoughts. One is it's taken a number of generations to get you to where you are now, and you're wanting to walk it all in a second. It takes a little time sometimes, and as you said, it can be instantaneous. One of the things that I find extremely helpful for moving it faster when I'm working with a client is to map it out in 3D, because quite often we're trying to solve or resolve the entire issue here, whereas if you put it out in front of you in 3D and you start to walk in it and feel it and talk about it, you actually find that multisensorial approach will shift things quite quickly, because you see, hear, or feel things that you hadn't before. So time also is your commitment. Some of it is commitment, and some of it is the commitment and elevated emotion that comes together, and you say yes, yes, yes. Jim will know this absolutely. If any part of you, head, heart, and gut, is not saying yes, you want to go back and check. And as soon as those are aligned, you'll find that it moves faster and moves smoothly.
With both of you, and I know we're coming close to the end of our program, Jim, your book is Expand the Power of Your Subconscious Mind. Now, this is Dr. Joseph Murphy's book, and then you have taken his knowledge and you have expanded on it, going into the supraconscious level. And then you've also got the 7 keys to unlock your full potential, and you're coming out with a new book pretty soon. So people can find the website. You can find the website, and that is going to be in the credits at the end of this program. And Judy, Decoding Your Emotional Blueprint, a Powerful Guide to Transformation Through Disentangling Multi-Generational Patterns. That is what you've got, but you've also got another book that is coming out, and both of you have a very strong drive in the fact that you want to be sure that as many people as possible are aware of their options, that they are not stuck. They may think they're stuck, but sometimes we have to get stuck. So we take the time to give to ourselves what we need. And so often, it's not going to come from an outside source. We have to make the decision. We have to make the decision about investing in ourselves. A long time ago, someone said the best thing you can ever do with money is invest in yourself. You can put stuff in a bank. You can put something in stock and bonds. But what if the bottom of your life falls out? What do you have? You have yourself. And if you've invested in yourself, then you're going to find that you've invested in a very special aspect because it goes with you 24/7 wherever you are. I want to thank both of you for being my guest. And for those of you that are watching this program, again, at the end, you'll find that the credits give the information on the websites for Judy and for Jim. And you will find that if you check out my website, then the Donna Sebo Show Network, you'll find out about my programs, my daily program, as well as Warriors for Peace. It has been a pleasure spending time with you. I hope that this has been something that has touched your heart, your mind, and also the dynamics of who you are as a human being, and that you recognize that you have got something very special to offer. Go for it. Bye for now.
You have been listening to the Donna Sebo Show Special Editions. The audio version of this program will also be heard on the Donna Sebo Show radio broadcast. We are delighted you were able to join us and invite you to share this programming with your friends and family. Have a rich and fulfilling life.